Awesome. All right, we'll go ahead and get things started. Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name's Adriana. I am the Customer and Field Marketing Specialist here at HammerTech, and I'd like to welcome you all to our first live event, Safety First, Lessons from Mission Critical Sites. This is actually a part of our mini-series that we've just come up with. It's called Mission Critical, A Journey into Safety Excellence. So it's a mini series with an industry-based article, a case study, and this live event is also a part of that mini series as well. So thank you all for being a part of it and for hopping on today's event. Just some quick housekeeping. This event will run for about 30 minutes. And then at the end, we will have a 15-minute Q&A. So we do have a set of questions ready, but feel free to use the Q&A feature at the end. And then if we have time, we can answer whatever questions that pop up in the Q&A. And if for any reason you're having any logistical issues with Zoom, please put it in the chat and I can try to assist you where I can. But without further ado, we'll start with some introductions. So Chris, take it away.
Thanks, Adriana. I'll go ahead and get my screen pulled up here. If you don't mind letting me know that everything goes well with that, it should be good. Perfect. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. As Adriana said, Chris Gitch, safety technology consultant here with HammerTech. Really what that means, my role is I work with general contractors and contractors around the nation, Canada, North America. Really just how to improve safety processes, safety standards, just really their safety outcomes in general on their sites by using safety technology. And really kind of how this webinar came about is just with my experience in doing mission critical work, building data centers. And from there, I do want to turn it over to Johnny here to introduce himself from Holder. And we have a little bit of history together. Yeah, Johnny, jump in, introduce yourself.
Yeah, appreciate that, Chris. Johnny Gordnier. I've been with Holder Construction going on 7 years here in a few months. Majority of that time was spent in the mission critical world. I did spend some time in Dallas, Texas, before I was fortunate enough to get into the mission critical world and was able to do some pretty cool stuff with airports and office build outs and whatnot. But yeah, spent the last 5 years of my time working in the mission critical world, and 2 years in Atlanta where I got the chance to work with Chris a little bit from afar, and then I've spent the last 2 years here in Northern Virginia area, and very, very excited to be here. Very excited to talk about software systems like HammerTech. I mean, really talk about all the value that it brings to these large projects with all the expectations that come with it. So very appreciative of you guys having me here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us. So a little bit on agenda. We already ticked off number one there, right? You guys know who we are, and I think we've seen some introductions coming in through the chat and the Q&A down there. Unfortunately, I can't really see that. Zoom doesn't cooperate with me very well. But really what we're going to get into and discuss today is really, I think we have some people that are familiar with mission critical construction and kind of the expectations of how that environment and how those types of projects, the rigid safety requirements behind those. So we'll kind of touch on that a little bit. But then really what we're going to focus on is two things. One being what can we take from mission critical and those, complex, high expectation, very professional type projects, and how can we transition that from a safety standpoint into, more what we would maybe call more typical commercial construction, warehouses, office buildings, that type of stuff that, is still being built everywhere and can really benefit from some of the lessons that have been learned in that mission critical environment. And then the last thing we'll touch on is just real world examples. I know Johnny can provide some of those along with myself of hey, here's some actual scenarios and some situations where safety technology has really helped solve some challenges and really, provided a huge benefit to teams on site, or whether it's from a project standpoint, portfolio standpoint, et cetera. I think Johnny can really touch on that. And then, yeah, we'll end with some Q&A. So without further ado, let's get into it, right? So Johnny, I'm going to let you start here. You've been doing data centers for a few years now. If you don't mind sharing on, what are some of the rigid safety requirements, and rigid might not be the best word, right? But kind of touch on the expectations surrounding safety and why they exist in like a mission critical environment.
Yeah, sure. So first and foremost, there are a lot of heightened expectations when you get into the mission critical world, and for good reasons, right? There's a lot of high risk, high hazard areas that we're dealing with, whether we're doing the initial build out or we're working in turned over space. A lot of different hazards depending on what world you're in, but a lot of hazards nonetheless. But ultimately, this all starts with what the plans we put together, the plans that we review with our clients, or the end users, and the plans that we review with the subcontractors and the people that are actually doing the work, right, where the rubber meets the road. I'd say the biggest challenge truly isn't always all these extra requirements or heightened requirements. Honestly, the biggest challenge is making sure that we hold ourselves accountable to do what we commit to, and to quite frankly follow the standards that have been put in place for a long time. And when you are in the mission critical world where there's a lot of resources and a lot of very intelligent people, they challenge you. They challenge you to do the right things. And it's all really good. With each one of these projects, there's always those speed bumps and those things that it might take some effort and some long days to make sure that we're getting over those humps. But ultimately, we're all better for it. And you really see it in the mission critical world. It's the leading edge when it comes to safety. And in my opinion, it's where really every phase of construction, whether we're talking office build outs, residential, airports, higher ed, we're all going to be there eventually. People like myself and Chris, we're just very fortunate to have been given the opportunities to work in these mission critical areas where we learn a lot, and we're all better for it on the back end. And the safety records often reflect that when you look at the amount of incidents that occur on these jobs with thousands of people at times. There's a lot to learn, and there's a lot of things that we obviously all had to kind of go through it from a learning curve standpoint. But ultimately, it's having a plan, it's making sure everybody's familiar with the plan, and it's making sure that that plan is executed, and then kind of getting all back together and going over what could have been done, what could have enhanced that plan or maybe made it go a little bit more smooth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like when I think of mission critical construction and kind of the demands behind it, you mentioned a couple of words there, one being accountability. I often think of like professionalism, and it's for good reason. Some of these projects are like per square foot, the most expensive, like developments that anywhere in the world. And so there's, with that, right, large budgets comes large expectations on how they're managed. And it's been very well established that, safe projects are generally more successful projects. And so, if we can essentially having a better safety outcomes and driving for higher standards of safety helps, ensure that these buildings or these facilities are delivered on time, on schedule, on budget, high quality, right? They're called mission critical for a reason, which is like they need to be operating 24/7, 365. And I know, we can probably keep kicking it back and forth for a while on this, but just some of the things like, that you mentioned, or like from a concrete examples, like setting high expectations, which they're called high, but in a lot of ways, it's just really following through on things that have existed for a long time. It's just like there really hasn't been systems or ways to, meet those expectations, right? And so I think mission critical construction has solved some of the ways of like, how do we actually meet the expectations that have existed in some ways for a long time? It just hasn't been a way to actually, successfully meet them consistently. So, Johnny, do you have anything to add before we kind of jump to, hey, how can we, take some of these learnings from mission critical and talk more in general about sort of wider project portfolios?
Yeah, I guess just real quick, you kind of got me thinking a little bit more. We always set these expectations for ourselves as GC, subcontractors, clients, whoever you may be. You set these expectations, and you very well could achieve those at the end of the day. But what we're realizing more and more is that we need to be able to validate that we've accomplished what we set out to accomplish in the first place. And safety software systems really help with that and really make it a lot easier. There's some work and some approach and mentality aspects that you need to kind of make sure that everybody's on the same page with up front. And then once everybody's on the same page, it really does make it, to Chris's point, it really does make everything a lot more efficient. And the project's better off for it in a number of ways, not just from a safety standpoint. But just being able to go and validate and be able to show everything that we've done has been a huge payoff going through the journey I've been on for the last 5 years in the construction industry, or mission critical industry more specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to like, all right. So you mentioned some stuff there on being able to validate, and I think you bring up a great point, right? On like, hey, there's there's a lot of companies or a lot of projects or places, if you will, that have impeccable safety records, and all it takes is you just you walk around a little bit and you're like, no way is this actually true. A lot of times, like if you don't want to know how things are going, if you don't ask about it or don't show interest in it, right, then it makes it less important. And so like I think this is a good transition into like, hey, how does, like, specifically from Holder standpoint, what have you guys taken from some of these mission critical jobs, sort of that cutting or that bleeding edge of improving your safety processes and outcomes? Like, how have you guys transitioned that into some of your other project types, or if you can elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I could go down a lot of different rabbit holes with this one. Something that sticks out to me, and where the industry's been as long as I've been in it, and certainly long before that, leading and lagging indicators. For so long, the only thing that we've really used as an industry to measure safety performance is our recordable rate, our DART rate, right? And it's very reactive to an extent, right? There is some value there. And it should be used where it makes sense, but ultimately you're getting a picture of what happened in the past. You're not getting a picture of where you're performing today, or where you're going to be performing in a few weeks, a few months. So working in the mission critical space has really helped kind of open our mind up to more of the leading indicators, whether that be inspections, training records, worker engagement, anonymous reporting, how many hazards have been reported unprompted. Right, those kind of things are those KPIs, those metrics have really opened our eyes in the last few years, and we've seen a direct correlation when it comes to incidents on the site, and so really focusing on those KPIs and those proactive measures, still giving our due diligence to the lagging indicators, right, because they matter, and we need to make sure that we're sharing lessons learned and reviewing incidents. But trying to look out ahead a little bit more. We're in an industry where we're constantly putting out fires. We're constantly running around and taking care of a million things that we didn't plan for that day. And this space, the mission critical space, has really challenged us to be a lot more forward thinking and planning our work out and using these KPIs to get a better idea of what's going to be coming up, so that we can spend more time putting out those small fires, and more importantly, spend more time out there engaging with the workforce, which is what matters the most at the end of the day.
Yeah, to me, the planning aspect of how much focus and emphasis is put on from a planning and anticipating, what's coming up, what are going to be the hazards, what are the risks, what are going to be the challenges of this work that's coming up. That's emphasized big in like a mission critical environment, and then identifying like, hey, this came up, this happened, right? Next time we do this, we need to ensure that, we do XYZ instead, or in addition to, right? And I think, the big emphasis on planning that exists in a mission critical environment versus some of the things I've seen in, other types of construction where it is a lot more reactionary of, hey, our plumber's showing up today. I don't actually know if these people are really, prepared to show up and work. Like, I haven't seen any of their safety documents, or, seen any of the plans for how they're going to manage this. And now, my plumber shows up and turns out he's actually unqualified. And now I have to go through all this stuff and, end up behind schedule. And so I think really like what's indicative of a kind of a successful safety program, or like moving towards a successful safety program, right? Emphasis on those leading indicators, but then also like just taking an inventory of how much time you spend planning versus how much time you spend like reacting to stuff. There's always going to be like small fires that come up and things that need to be changed. but like, are you fighting fires, or like, are you, doing your best to prevent them? And so I've seen like from a successful, whether any individual project, I think that's a great indicator of like, how much time are you looking into the future versus how much time are you looking into the past? And I think, some of the things that you mentioned there around like anonymous hazard identification, or, near misses, right? How often, like, how many times do you come across a project that has like 0 near misses, and they're like, oh no, everything goes well. Like, I do construction, I kind of build my own house and whatever. Like, anytime I do something, like there's something that goes wrong that would probably qualify as a near miss. And just, you go across a project and, oh yeah, we don't have any near misses out here. And it's kind of like, well, this is some of the things that we need to look at, right? So Johnny, anything else you want to add on this, or any concrete examples that have carried over from mission critical environments into Holder, into your wider operations?
Yeah, again, I'm just kind of just listening to you, and it's just got me thinking about a lot right now. But there was a time, I think I caught the tail end of it. I'm sure it's been going on forever, right? But site specific safety plans. Obviously, as a general contractor, we're expected to have one, and we're expected to go execute it. But there's a long time in the industry where we have the general standard, right? We go and request safety plans from the subs. And we get a hard copy binder, and we go and set it on the shelf, and we're like, all right, we got it. Great. Right. Problem solved. We're ready to go to work. And it wasn't until we started challenging ourselves, and obviously some of that comes through working in the mission critical world, but it's just also just indicative of the times that we're in for good reason. Let's go and read these subs site specific safety plans. I'm sure there's a lot of great information. There's a lot of smart people that took the time to put those together. The people that put those together aren't always the people that are actually going to be out there managing or supervising the work, right? So something that's been very beneficial for us, and I think across the board in the industry, is being familiar with the plans that are submitted. You hit on it a little bit early. Being familiar, making sure that we understand, one, is it compliant, right? That's very important. Is everyone trained on it, but is it feasible? Because there can be a lot of great things in a plan. And it might be the most safe plan that you'll ever see in your life, but the reality is when you get out there and you see the actual environment that you're in, and the personnel, tools, and equipment that you have to use, we all need to be on the same page with what we're actually using out there. And being a little more proactive, that's kind of the narrative or the theme I've noticed as we've been talking here, and for good reason. Being more proactive and understanding what the plans are in advance, so we can make sure that people understand it, they're trained, and we can hold them accountable to going and doing things the way that it's been committed. It's been a huge improvement. I've noticed, not just obviously with the company I work for, but across the mission critical industry. And again, you keep seeing it's a direct reflection to the performance out there, and a direct reflection to we are getting more near misses reported and more hazards reported, which is a positive thing, but we're seeing fewer injuries and incidents as a result, right? It's you plan the work. We always talk about planning the work, but you got to go work the plan. That's the most important piece.
Yeah, absolutely. That so I think that talking specifically about some of that stuff around safety, safety plans and reviewing subcontractor documents and sort of all that stuff that like you said, maybe it's done from like a compliance standpoint, but it sits in a binder, or it's in someone's office, or it's on a shared drive somewhere, right? It's kind of like, hey, we submitted it, we reviewed it, yep, we checked that box, and then the guys in the field actually have no idea what that says, or what the expectations their own company sets for them. And so I think this is where we could get into some of those more concrete examples like that, and probably dozens others. We won't have time for that, but let's kind of go back and forth on some of these things that we've seen. I don't know if you have another example right top ahead of some of those challenges that you've seen, and then like how you guys solved them, and really, from a technology standpoint, what have you used to improve that and kind of like solve those challenges that you've identified?
Yeah, I have a lot of very specific examples. I can give you one that was just 2 weeks ago, right, where I got a crane plan submitted to me in advance. Everybody did their due diligence, and they did the right things. They got a crane plan submitted over to us for a critical pick, which in our world we consider anything above 50%. That is another one of those best practices, or maybe heightened requirements that you don't necessarily see anywhere. But either way, all the same information is important to us, right? The crane model information, the load weights, the logistics piece of it, how far offset are you from the pick, from the center pin. And they submitted a perfect plan. I mean, it was perfect across the board as you look at it on paper, right? It was you couldn't get a stronger plan from that standpoint. And it wasn't until I took the superintendent and the safety professional that was on site for that specific project and walked them out to where we were going to go and actually make the pick. And there's an excavation right there where they claim that they're going to be able to be 40-foot offset from the pick, and it just wasn't feasible with what we had going on out there. And talking through it, we realized that we weren't able to maintain that under 75% goal for the crane's capacity that we wanted to with that, and we had to ultimately go get a bigger crane so we could stand a little further away from the activity. And nothing went wrong, and at the end of the day, the plan worked, but we just had to have more conversations about it. And to your point, Chris, we didn't have those conversations there in front of the crane the day that it got set up and ready to roll. When they brought out 15 people, paying them for the day to get the job done, we were able to go and do it 2 weeks in advance, and ultimately hit our date to get that OFCI equipment installed. So that's a very specific example. I don't know if you want to keep going back and forth.
No, I think that's perfect because it shows, I know what, well, depending on what kind of crane you were renting and or what kind of crane they were bringing out, the potential schedule delays that could have been experienced, you could probably quantify exactly what that impact was just from identifying that one simple thing and sort of the follow-on effects of that. So that's perfect. One that I hear all the time of that, and you guys probably hear it more and more, right? It's unexperienced workforce, or it's a new workforce. They coming out kids out of high school and everything, which is great, but there's not they don't have the I'll call it tribal knowledge that a lot of those older workers do, of just inherently knowing the right way of doing a job. And so it's kind of one of the ways that I've seen technology help is being able to provide them the tools they need to do their job successfully. It's a lot more than just being like, hey, Johnny, I hired you today. You're going to be a carpenter. Go read the safety manual, and then you'll know everything you need to know about performing your job safely, right? It's knowing hey, Johnny's qualified to run this circular saw, or he's been trained to do this, or and anytime he goes and does that activity, hey, Johnny, here's the hazards that are typically experienced, from this specific scope of work. Making that information available to people out in the field. I know I've seen companies that they've tried to do it with binders and information in a gang box, and you walk by and it's just covered in dust and no fingerprints on it. It's that thing hasn't been touched in ever. And so providing using tools like HammerTech to provide information to people in real time as they're doing this stuff is, to me, super valuable, and one of the things that I've seen that's not mission critical specific. I don't know if you have anything to add there, or anything special you guys are doing, especially for new workers coming on site.
Yeah, I guess two things, but just specifically back to plan reviews. One thing that has been very, very helpful as far as streamlining the process with plan reviews is using HammerTech specifically is what we use, and for a reason. For the longest time, the plan reviews were very, I would call it inconsistent, right? Everybody has their way of doing it, whether it's word of mouth, whether it's sitting down in a room and going through it together, which can be very beneficial, right? It's very important to have those conversations, or maybe just getting it submitted to you via email. And then if someone does their due diligence, they review it like they should, and then they respond back with a few maybe comebacks, right? There's a lot of different ways to do it, and I think that's great, but it also opens us up for failure in a sense, right? When we don't have one consistent way and one streamlined way to receive plans, review them, and provide feedback. And that's one of the most valuable tools I've found as we've continued to use HammerTech over the years. Is everybody from a subcontractor standpoint understands, hey, the plans are to be submitted through HammerTech. It's very simple, very easy to go and submit plans, whether that be a site specific, a JHA, even down to permits, obviously. But And then that gives us the ability, we get the notification more often than not waiting for it, right? As dates maybe approach. And that gives us the opportunity to go through with a real fine tooth comb and identify any of those gaps or even some things that they commit to that we might have an idea that they won't be able to achieve it, right? And both are important because we want to make sure that we're staying true to what we our plan is. To your point, making sure all the workers are trained. But having one process that everyone's familiar and comfortable with is, as again, it has an added time to the process, even though it might sound like it at a high level. It's really made things quicker, easier, more efficient, having one method of plan submission and plan review. And then ultimately the last step being out there and going through it with the workforce to make sure everybody's comfortable, confident with what they're going to go and execute.
Yeah, it really helps you from a full cycle, like, hey, we're getting ready to kick off a project. Here we go. Here's the stuff that we need to do, right? We start bringing people in, getting them through orientation, ensuring like, hey, these people that are showing up, they're qualified to be doing the things that they say they're going to be doing. They're trained to do it. We know that Joe has a forklift certification, so he's good to operate the forklift. Really just kind of building efficiencies in all of those things and then making it available at any given time, any moment, right? I think we've talked, you're overseeing multiple sites now. I can imagine how valuable it might be to be able to look up anything of like getting a picture of, hey, this is what's happening on this site on this particular day, or knowing that 2 weeks from now, we have that crane pick going on. So maybe I'm going to make an emphasis of being out there for that. Anything to speak to there that you can elaborate on?
Yeah, I mean, it just happened this morning, as it does most days, where I might not necessarily be on the site where a certain activity is going to be upcoming in the next 2 days to a week out, and the team has done a great job of reviewing and making sure they're comfortable with it, and they just want one last check, one last set of eyes to maybe either identify something or maybe suggest a best practice. And there was a time where I would have to, again, get in an email, maybe drop everything I'm doing, make sure I run out to the site, and where we stand now, I'm able to access that plan, that permit, that JHA, or I'm able to access the specific workers that are attached to that JHA or permit and be able to go in and validate training records. And I'm fortunate that I spend enough time out on site that I know a good bit of the workers themselves. So obviously I don't want to go into anything blindly, but the confidence of the team and the processes that we have in place for them to review everything. And then, me being able to step out of a meeting or step out of a walk on another project and dedicate 30 minutes to 45 minutes to review everything to make sure everything's set and ready to go. I mean, it's huge. Again, it's improving efficiency. It's improving our ability to meet dates. It's improving our ability to make sure that workers are ready to go before they get started on an activity.
So more efficient and more effective is kind of what I'm hearing there. So with that, let's jump to some of the Q&A here. There we go. My keyboard wasn't cooperating. So yeah, I think we've hit on some of these questions already. That first one being like, what are some of those key tactics or processes that can be transferred to other projects? And I think the biggest one or big theme throughout our conversation today is really around that planning, and just the more you can plan, the less fires you have to put out. And then it's kind of a sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy that the more time you spend planning, the less fires you have, which allows you to spend more time planning and actually anticipating the things that are going to come up, right? Identifying that, hey, this crane's not going to work for this because of this excavation is going to be here, right? Something that otherwise may have been identified the day of, if it was identified at all. People tip over cranes all the time. And so, could have prevented that. Johnny, do you have anything to add there on kind of that first question?
To be honest with you, Chris, I don't know if I have anything additional to add. Just to the time that you are able to put forward up front using systems like this gives you more time to go out there and be in a position that truly matters.
Yeah.
So often when we are in these projects with very tight schedules, we have so many things to juggle, and it's very easy to put things off until the day of, and then you're out there and you realize, hey, we're not able to go and execute this plan as it was reviewed and submitted. So being able to have access to this stuff way earlier than what we were originally accustomed to, it gives us the ability to essentially work through all the issues or concerns early, so that we can spend the time there really getting to interact and engage with the workers, so that we know for a fact that they are comfortable with what's going on. It gives us the ability to do some final checks where our head might not necessarily be cluttered with a lot of different things that we got to go and square away. We can truly just focus on, all right, we all are aware of what the plan is, and we're able to sit there as a group and talk and validate, steps 1 through whatever it may be, to make sure that there are going to be no hiccups along the way.
Cool. That's yeah, some great insight there. This the second one that we have, and I think we hear it quite often, and it's maybe not like necessarily which metrics or KPIs have improved, but I mean that's part of it. But then also I think kind of the unwritten part of this question is really around like what are you guys able to measure now? Like what are you focusing on from like especially you mentioned earlier, that leading indicator standpoint that previously you just couldn't because the data didn't exist or the systems didn't exist in order to allow you to measure that data?
Yeah, I think we always did it, but we were never able to show that we did it, right? But focusing on HRAs, high risk activities, or sticky stuff that can kill you, SIFs, PSIFs, significant injury fatalities, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of different keywords across the industry, but we through systems like HammerTech, we've been able to develop very specific inspections that are focused on high risk activities and potential high energy exposure, right? So that's one KPI that we are very, very focused on continuing to build more and more data with. It's something that over the last few years has continued to be a bigger area of emphasis within the company I work for specifically, and obviously majority, if not all, of the clients in the mission critical space. They're very focused in. That obviously they definitely care about the lagging indicators, and that's not going away anytime soon. And that, again, we still track that, but trying to focus as much time as possible on the areas where we have the most risk, i.e. the high risk activities, whether that's rigging and hoisting, that's trenching and excavations, that's fall exposure, that's energy control, and developing inspections specific to those high risk activities. So during that final step, when we're going over the plan and then watching the plan come to fruition, we're able to go and validate and see if we have any gaps. Were there not enough, an equal or greater amount of controls compared to the hazards that were identified? If there's 7 hazards identified with this activity and we only have 3 controls in place, well, we might need to take some time to reflect and understand, did we not truly capture everything? And that KPI specifically, the high energy control KPIs and the HRA and sticky focus, that to me has been, as far as the amount of time you put into it, the most that you get out of it. And again, it's really good to help focus everybody in on the stuff that matters the most, which truly is those high risk activities that could have a result in a significant injury or fatality at the end of the day. We have a lot of inspections. I could go and show you metrics for days where the highest observed category is barricades or housekeeping, right? That's always, I know Chris, that's always the top few categories, right? And those are very important because ultimately a clean job is more often than not a safe job, and we shouldn't stray away from making sure that that's in place. But that to me is more of a culture piece or I guess culture is the right word, right? Like that's stuff that we need to work to set in place day one, so that we can truly, again, focus on making sure that those big items don't get missed day to day. And to your point, we're not going around putting out a million fires. We can truly put as much focus into that high risk activity that might be going on that day.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I know you guys have really sort of set a standard of kind of, I'll call it inspecting against your expectations. So, hey, we've got a plan. Now we're actually going to, ensure that it's being enacted, right? We're going to ensure that it's an adequate plan. It's a proper plan. And then as we're doing it, we're going to kind of that, continuous improvement, what we're doing, we're inspecting against it. Are we actually doing what we said we were going to do? A term that from previous experience that was always thrown out was operational discipline. And I think it applies here as well. Like, hey, it's great. We did all this stuff. Now let's actually ensure that we're doing it the way we said we were going to. But just kind of to hit on this last one here, then, like, what's what do you see as coming next from a safety technology or just technology in general within the construction industry? And what are you guys doing to prepare? I know I can share a little bit, right? The easy one that is always thrown out, and you hear it everywhere now. It doesn't matter, not just construction specific, but AI, artificial intelligence, and I think we can talk a little bit about what that means. But truly, what I see is, hey, everyone in the field is becoming more connected just because of the necessity that's been created within the construction industry to have immediate information at our fingertips in the field. Whether it's plans and documents from hey, what am I actually building? Can I take pictures of it, do a quality inspection, but then also from a safety standpoint as well. So, Johnny, I don't know if you have anything you want to add there.
You mentioned AI, and as much as it makes my skin crawl a little bit, I do recognize that it's going to be a big part of our future, and there's definitely a lot of value there. I'm just very, very passionate about making sure that we use it the right way. But one thing that is, it's been something that I've been very curious and looking into. I'll call it on my own, but with a few of my associates at Holder, is how do we measure engagement during these training sessions or during PTP reviews? So often, and I'll keep kind of bouncing this back to you, Chris. So often I've sat in RCAs where the root cause was inadequate planning, right? Inadequate planning is the reason that this all that it opened us up to a potential failure. And then you go and look at the PTP for that day, and it might be the greatest PTP that was ever created, or a pre-task plan. I know we all have different acronyms for it, so I apologize for that. But it might be the best pre-task plan that was ever put together. But you could go and talk to the workers that were involved in the work, and they might not necessarily remember it. It might not have come across the right way, or we've all seen it, that it might have just been a sign-in sheet for that day to verify attendance. So one thing I'm very passionate about and want to see the industry go towards is a way to measure engagement in those pre-task plan meetings. There's a lot of systems out there that are experimenting with that, and truthfully, I'm not 100% sure if HammerTech is. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's something that you guys probably get asked about a lot. But ways that we can find a way to monitor that engagement. I know that PTPs can be submitted via paper copy on any platform, even if it's just through email, right? But that doesn't give you a sense or feel of how that conversation went in the morning. So that's something I'm very interested in seeing some improvement in the future, and I think AI will probably be a big part of that. Whether that's audio PTPs or voice to text or some other idea that someone way smarter than me could come up with. But I really want to see where we head in that direction, because that's the most important piece, is that conversation. Documentation obviously is important, but if the message isn't getting across, then it's for nothing, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm right there with you, backing up a little bit on the AI stuff. And you said, oh, it makes my skin crawl, hearing it, right? Because I think there's a world, or actually you could probably do it today. I think you could probably jump on ChatGPT and say, hey, I'm going to be doing this type of work. Give me the typical hazards and the controls for it. And it could probably spit you out. That's something that could probably be done right now. But, that just amplifies kind of what you were just mentioning around engagement, and actually going through and understanding and internalizing, okay, these are the things that can hurt me today. And getting an understanding of that, versus I think where the AI really comes in some of the things from we're gathering more data. So, there's only so much that a human mind or maybe there's only so much we can do efficiently that, to pull things out and kind of process data on our own. Right. And that's really where I see benefits of AI coming in and some of the things that we're working on is, pulling that in to do a lot of that data analysis to, free up time for some of those, I'll call it like higher impact activities that you mentioned earlier. Yeah, pre-task plan engagement, worker engagement in the field, to me, that's huge as well of being able to measure that. And what does that look like? It can start as simple as right now, how much time was actually spent on, developing that pre-task plan? What time was it initiated? What time was it submitted? And sort of being able to benchmark them against each other to be like, hey, this company is spending 2 minutes on their pre-task plan. Like, obviously that's not adequate. Like, you can, do some things that exist already, but I see that, some advancements and improvement there. Like I said earlier, it all comes back to planning. And to me, the biggest or the most important aspect of planning is really that pre-task plan, or that daily planning activity that, a work crew or an individual worker is undertaking to say, this is what can hurt me today. This is how I'm going to stop it from hurting me. Identifying that stuff is key for improving safety. So, Adriana, do we have any other questions from the Q&A or anything else from anyone on the group here that we haven't hit on?
Looks like there are no open questions from the audience. So if you guys want to wrap up, or if Johnny, you have anything more to add, please feel free.
I have a question for both of you, actually. Something I'm curious about. Do you guys notice I suppose a drop off in interest for software systems when you go out of the mission critical world, or are you seeing that pick up quite a bit? Again, as the industry continues to evolve, it seems like more and more, or at least we're adopting it on every project, no matter what we're building, right? I think mission critical obviously drove that decision, because they're often the ones that are most willing to try these kind of things out in the name of constant improvement. But just curious from your guys' side, are you seeing, I guess, the rest of the industry catch up with mission critical when it comes to interest in safety software?
Short answer is yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of the reasons that you mentioned there for, Holder's journey is sort of starting to take hold into the greater industry as well. Just with, companies seeing like, wow, this is, we can be more efficient while also being more effective. We can adopt some of these force multipliers and, help our people. Like, everyone's struggling with labor, whether we're talking about labor in the field or, actual like management labor, if you will, from like a general contractor standpoint. And so yeah, we absolutely are seeing kind of a groundswell of outside of the mission critical environment too. So yeah, I appreciate
normally it takes a few dominoes to fall, and then all of a sudden everyone gets to see what works and what doesn't work, and everyone kind of follows suit, is what I've noticed. We certainly do it. We get feedback from other people in the industry on what works best and what doesn't. If we didn't have that feedback, it might not be enough for us to go and take the leap, right? But it just seems more and more that companies get to use these softwares. It just seems to be a ripple effect where all of a sudden it just blows up and everybody's using it. And I'm very happy to hear that, because again, there's so much value there. And if you can plan the project the right way and incorporate something like this up front, I mean, it pays off huge for everybody. From obviously from a performance standpoint, but just from a stress standpoint, right? Like the quality of life and the quality of not only your job, but your life outside of work. It really does help to know that there's these extra steps in our processes that are essentially doing the work for us once you get everything planned out the right way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, it's, construction, really, a lot of it is around efficiency, but if you can be more effective and more efficient, to me, that's a win-win. So appreciate that question though, Johnny. But otherwise, appreciate everyone joining us. Thanks again. Adriana, anything to close out with from you?
Nope, that's all. Johnny, Chris, thanks so much for joining in. And everyone else. We really appreciate you guys hopping on for this live event. This session will be recorded, so if you want to refer back to it, we will be sending it out in an email. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Appreciate you guys having me.